Hello, everybody. It's Friday, and welcome to Moohead Radio. I'm your host, a big and furry bovine. Joining me on the air, Tony the Calf and Brian, as we talk football, Week 4 NFL style, with the Browns going to Minnesota to play the Vikings. But before we get there, I always like to start with other things that are happening, that are relevant. If you were just, a lot of times people work. A lot of people don't watch this show, of course, until after they come home from work. They haven't had time to go around the internet and see. Lamar Jackson has returned to practice after missing 2 days with what they were calling a back injury, which is interesting. The other thing I find interesting about the article is the quote that goes with it. Harbaugh said he was a full participant today. He moved around well during the media viewing portion of the practice. Meanwhile, Hollywood Brown, who has a cottage industry in dropping perfect throws by Lamar Jackson, said, I felt he looked real good. He's been looking good all season. He's been precise. Too bad I can't fucking catch them. But at any rate, where the back injury came from, nobody seems to either know or want to talk about. But I'll say this.
Wasn't it a hip injury that was reported after he did the flip into the end?
That was reported, but not this back ailment, because the way it was described was that this was kind of a lingering thing. What Greg Roman said was Jackson was dealing with, quote, a little back flare-up. A flare-up is an indication of a pre-existing situation. So I'm not sure, but he's going to go out there and run and get hit again as he runs the ball between the tackles. Yeah.
Well, and he's been sacked quite a few times this season, too.
Yeah, his body cannot hold up playing the way they're playing. Here's another interesting story. If you weren't reading online like a cow was, I'm not a good reader, but it takes time. The Browns may have been playing a game with the Broncos here. The Browns tried to get Brett Rippon, their practice squad quarterback, away from them. And the Broncos responded by advancing him onto the regular squad, the active roster.
Now, we actually had the elder Ripien on the Browns at the end of his career.
Yep. But the word around the league, I mean, is it the question of Mullins? They felt that Rippon was better, or the perpetual things I'm reading that Brett Rippon is considered a very good young mind and may feel that his future is more in being a quarterback coach than just sitting on a practice squad somewhere. Whatever reason it was, we're never going to find out right now. But if his name, Brett Rippon, surfaces in regards to any future quarterback coaching, opening, for example, if they were to promote one Alex Van Pelt and then they move in a quarterback coach, that might be a direction the Browns were interested in going toward. But I thought that was interesting. Why would you take your quarterback who is on the practice squad and instantly elevate him to the active roster when you have backup quarterbacks and he was sitting on the practice squad? There's a bigger question here. But next was the game last night. Mm-hmm. Not a particularly good football game. I mean, it was interesting, not particularly good. But, when the Bengals, when their defensive back pulled a John Johnson III and somehow lost Chenault, who runs like a Renault, that's an old 60s car reference, and got spun around, and the next thing you know, it's 14-0, and then all of a sudden the ball's on the half-yard line. And, now I read the story. A frustrated Urban Meyer calls Jacksonville's 19th straight loss heartbreaking. I'll tell you what's heartbreaking. What do you have to lose? And I would say this about the Browns, and I say it about Huey Jackson in an 0-16 season, and God only knows if you've lost 19 straight football games. What in the fuck do you have to lose? And when you're 4th and goal at the 1.5 yard line, what stupid fucker calls a play in which the quarterback has to go in without a lead blocker? All we hear about is James Robinson, how improved he is. When they were running James Robinson on the field and he was just faking, half the defense was following Robinson, and that's when Trevor Lawrence got his yardage. Why, on the most critical, potentially deflating play in Cincinnati Stadium, why in the world would you have no lead blocker and let a young quarterback take 2 steps to his right and put his head down and try to burrow in? You know that the Browns would hand the ball off to Kareem Hunt. He would leap over the goal line. You know that, don't you?
Yeah.
You know that the Bengals were crushed emotionally and giving up yardage on the ground when they were facing lead blockers. Why?
I wish these coaches would understand game theory. Would help a lot. I mean, if they take the 3 there, we're at 24-24.
Yeah, I mean, it's, any way you look at it, I mean, I think people would have said, well, if he took the 3, he just doesn't have confidence in his team. But then I take a look at what he calls, and you know what it looks like? It looks like a call that's like, he has one guy on the team.
It's an Ohio State call.
Yeah, it's a bullshit college call. I got a bigger offensive line than them. We can definitely push it back half a yard. This is the NFL. And I don't understand what was working that got them down there was working because of a 2-headed monster. It's no different than what the Ravens do. They'll hand the ball off, but every time that Lamar Jackson runs the ball, for God's sakes, it's off a play action. Every single time. And it's predicated upon, you take a look at where the defensive end is and where he is lined up, and then you decide whether you're going to give the ball to the running back or you're going to keep it yourself. And it's a game of knowing, by sight reading where, what you're going to do. They left the quarterback with no option except to do what he did, and he didn't make it. And the second that third quarter began, you knew what was going to happen, didn't you?
Yep.
Because we've watched the Browns for decades. We knew what was going to happen.
And then the Jaguars fucking struck back. They got
that's just it.
That's a touchdown drive. And then it's 4th and 4 from the 50, or 3rd and 4 from the 50. And what does Urban Meyer call? A 1-yard out route to Tyron Johnson.
Yep.
Like, what the fuck you doing?
You don't believe. And look, based on the passing game that I saw on
that's the exact same shit that he would pull at Ohio State when they would fucking lose to a Penn State or a Michigan State or some Purdue or some fucking team that they were supposed to absolutely stomp by 31 fucking points. That's the kind of shit he would pull.
Well, the thing that left me cold is that you're in a position to win, and you should show confidence in, if you want to show confidence in your running game, then plow it in, man. That's the Bengals in front of you, man. It's not the steel curtain of old, This is not a team that has great linebackers or great defensive linemen. And the fact of the matter is the Bengals have been good against the run, but not against the Jaguars. They weren't. My God, the Jaguars were ripping holes open.
Yep.
And even the RB2 had a whole bunch of yards.
Yeah. I mean,
He had like 60 or 70 yards rushing.
Call didn't make any damn bit of sense to me whatsoever. And if Urban Meyer is frustrated, I can only imagine the fan base. And the other thing is, and this is what I believe. On the headline, Saquon Barkley says he won't make excuses amid high expectations, that he hasn't looked for shit since he's come back from the torn ACL. He's only run for 134 yards on 39 carries. You can do the math. It's 3.5 yards a carry. It's just not good. The Giants are 0-3. That's just not good. But the Giants are just not good. And the Jaguars are just not good. And you can put anybody in these situations. You can put Sam Darnold on the Jets, and he's not so good. You can put him on the field with the Panthers, and at least, and I'm not going to tell you that he's going to continue winning like he is, but he didn't win 3 in a row in New York, did he?
Yeah.
So, these
Well,
teams
he also didn't have Christian McCaffrey and Moore and some of these other guys.
Because the front office doesn't get players. It's not because the front office is always in a great position to draft people. They always draft the wrong people.
And I give a lot of credit to the Carolina defense too. That they are no joke.
But bad organizations yield bad results, and this is why there is no margin of error like for the Lions when a call goes against them in the critical moments, because they gave up the 4th and 19. And you don't do that and win football games, because the league will find a way to snatch it away from you if you do that. God forbid, when the Browns guy when Dwayne Rudd took his helmet off, that was just an excuse to get them close enough to kick the field goal to win the game, just to fuck the Browns in the ass, because they're a bad organization. And nothing's funnier to these people than kicking the whipping boy. That's the way it works.
Yeah.
I'm just, but so now, it's frustrating to Urban Meyer. Well, get used to losing, because you may believe in your guys, but your guys played as good a game as they could play under the circumstances, and they needed that touchdown at the end of the first half. They needed that. And you came up with a shriveled raisin testicle of a call, and that's what happens. And it's not real good.
Yeah.
And I see Bronk. Hiya, Bronk.
You get feedback from me.
No, nothing but good feedback.
Oh, good. All right, that should be better anyway. I'm eating some food at the moment.
Oh, what is that?
That is vegetarian cannelloni with ricotta cheese and rocket leaves and spinach and.
Wow, you're going vegetarian on us?
No, it's just I happen to like this dish, so. And a bit of red hot sauce there. Get that on camera.
Yeah.
So I might mute my camera. So
well, I was going to ask you, Brian, since you meant key, are you a vegetarian?
I've always been a vegetarian.
Oh, okay. I'm glad to hear that. That makes me feel very good for you.
Well, there's always a chance for you to turn there, Brian.
A heel turn.
I'm not one of your little grooming children, Bronk.
Oh, there you go, Brian.
But as the game gets closer with Cleveland and Minnesota, and we'll shift over into that. This one is a tough one for me to call, and it's because.
Are we talking about the Browns here? Or
right now we're just starting to talk about the Browns and the Vikings.
Okay.
Yeah, the Vikings, it's easy to sit there and say, oh, they were 0-2, and it's like, oh, God, the guy missed the field goal. He was our former kicker. They're still in the dumps. But they're 1-2 now, but they could have easily won all of the games that they played, and their offense has been sterling. Defense has had some problems there, although not in the second half of the last game they played against the Seahawks, which before the show, Tony and I were saying we don't know what happened to the Seahawks in the second half. But then again, the Browns didn't look for shit defensively until they really rushed the shit out of out of the Bears. So don't play with your food, Bronk. Don't play with your food. So what the Browns have, and it's becoming a little bit apparent to me, and I saw this last year, but Chubb was just so dominating last year. You didn't get to see as much Kareem Hunt. But Kareem Hunt looks fresh, man. He really looks fresh. Yes, Bronk.
Chubb, right. The Chicago Bears, if you got, let me back up a minute. If you've got NFL Game Pass, you got access to the coach's film, which is basically a 50-yard line press box film, and the same play is repeated in the end zone camera as well. And you can watch the film without any commentary. Now, what happened in the first half of the Chicago game is that Roquan Smith,
I mean,
number
no question.
58, he spent the entire first half 3 yards off the line of scrimmage, directly in front of Nick Chubb, wherever he fucking was, and whatever Nick Chubb did, Roquan Smith went after it. Suddenly, when Chubb was out of the game, Roquan Smith didn't know what the fuck to do. And he sort of like hovered around in the zone, or he'd go off and try to cover Hooper, which was a mismatch, or he'd just like wander around. Now, granted, Smith ended up with 5 tackles and 4 assists, but he didn't get any tackles for loss. So the reason why Chubb didn't look that good is that they purposely had an all-pro shadowing him from 3 yards in front of the line of scrimmage. No wonder he wasn't good.
And I'll tell you something else about Roquan Smith. And I agree with what you're saying 100%, because I watched the game again, and he was like on him like white on rice.
He was watching his eyes. He was fine. Take away Chubb and let us play all of our other players, and we'll kick your ass.
Well, what happened on the play that Baker overthrew Demetric Felton was a simple wheel pattern, and it was Roquan Smith who got beat down the sidelines. And he actually grabbed Demetric Felton, and when I saw that play a second time, that should have been a defensive holding, without a question. Because anytime a ball's overthrown, but a guy grabs a guy by the jersey, you can actually see the stretch of the uniform, that should have been called a defensive holding. But there was more. There's more. You point out the Hooper thing, but there was another play that I found interesting. There was a play in which Dominic Peoples-Jones, he went out on Donovan Peoples-Jones, went out into the flat. And it looked like that was one of the possible outlet quick reads for Baker. And he just turned that up right around the sideline, and there was nothing but daylight in front of him. And that was Roquan Smith again. Roquan Smith can't play coverage. He is a beast against the running game.
Absolutely.
But I know that there are going to be teams who are going to isolate him on a running back in the weeks to come. And I guarantee you, Roquan Smith, for all the strong, good talk about him, is going to end up giving up a large touchdown pass because he's not covering the flat for shit against, as far as coverage is concerned.
I think the Browns discovered what was going on with Smith and the linebacking core of the Bears. Took them a quarter and a half to do it. They figured it out, and they figured, well, let's take Smith out of the game. And that's why we started scoring like 24 points.
But I also think that Kareem Hunt was just a battering ram. I mean, he was just hitting the line at full force, hole or no hole. I mean, even on plays where they hit him at the line of scrimmage, he would drag them forward for 3 or 4 yards.
Or he'd bounce off and keep going.
Yeah. I mean, he was really, they said, running angry. He was, really propelled.
They weren't going after
Nick Chubb said that.
Yeah.
Nick Chubb said that on the sidelines.
And I mean, that's a great salute to Chubb if their strategy was to shadow him and to make
And
sure that
he
he
also
wasn't the
told-
one who beat them, you know?
He also told Hunt that they've got his number, so it's going to be Hunt's
Correct.
game. And that just sounded so much like Viner and Mac to me.
Well, I mean, again, the blocking is what counts. And eventually, the Browns' offensive line got it together and was able to get those holes that were necessary to wear down the Bears. And the Bears are a defensive first team because they have no offense. The Minnesota Vikings are a slightly different animal. And, you know, I want to share with you some statistics. You know, Kirk Cousins is completing 74% of his throws. I mean, and that is a lot for him. 74% completion is outstanding. 918 yards, 7.7 yards per throw. But it's that he has a number of receivers that he uses in different ways. He's throwing for 318 yards per game. And his overall rating is a 118.3, which is just really, really good. You know, we know that Dalvin Cook is going to be out there playing. They're saying he's questionable, but he has practiced the last 2 days, and he will be out there. But even if not, his replacement got 112 yards against the Seahawks, and God only knows what they were doing out there. In receiving yards, Justin Jefferson is a big-time receiver. And, you know, this is a guy who's averaging almost 13 yards per catch and, you know, 84.7 yards per game. He has been targeted 30 times and has caught 20 of them. So, I mean, and at 254 yards, then there's KJ Osborne, a wide receiver with 193 yards. And then Adam Thielen. And Thielen is a guy who is their go-to third down guy. He's what Dave Logan used to be to the Browns when Brian Sipe was the quarterback. Adam Thielen averages 8.6 yards per you know, pass reception. But he gets first downs, like 12 first downs on receptions. I mean, and he only has 21 receptions on the year. So literally 12 out of 21 have created first downs. And this contributes to a problem because when you have multiple receivers, including Tyler Conklin, a tight end, who has caught 13 passes, there is reason to believe that they can spread the ball around, which makes it difficult if you're going to be going man-to-man on these people, because you have Dalvin Cook to worry about the backfield, and he's got 192 yards in 2 games played, averaging 4.6 per carry, but he's a load, man. He's, I mean, that's tough. On the defensive side of the ball, you know, the number of sacks, 10. You know, do they have a sack master? Daniel Hunter, their defensive end, has 4 sacks this year. That's a hefty total for only having played 3 games. By NFL standards, that's having a hell of a season. And Michael Pierce, the defensive tackle, has 2 sacks. And, you know, I think that their defense has kind of been meh. Greg Joseph is their place kicker. We know about him. And he was questionable because he's not sure which direction he's supposed to kick the ball.
He's always questionable.
Yeah, well, always questionable is right. He's not somebody I would want on the field with the game on the line. And there's a couple of teams who could tell you about that. The team, though, as a whole, this is where the interesting things come out. They've outscored their opponents 29-26. All right? Total touchdowns 10-9. First downs 74-62. Rushing first downs 23-18. They're winning all of these statistics. Passing first downs 46-42. Their third down efficiency, they're 17 of 40, but their opponents are only 9 of 31. They're getting teams off the field back into the hands of the defense. Into the offense. Fourth down efficiency, they're 2 for 2. In actual net passing yards, 891, but they've given up 871. So they average giving up 290 passing yards per game. They have not intercepted a pass this year. So you can't say that their win was because of turnovers. They haven't gotten that from their secondary. They've been intercepted twice. And Kirk Cousins has been known to throw interceptions, but he hasn't been doing it as frequently this year. In rushing attempts, they've had 83-75 for their opponents, and they've rushed for 384 yards versus 358. In 3 games, they've given up 120 yards, and they haven't seen a running game nearly as good as the Cleveland Browns. So there are holes in this team, but the holes in the team are mainly defensive holes. And the way that the Browns are going to have to cope this week is by establishing the running game and really going after them, pound on them that way. And they've got to look downfield. And the time of possession in a game like this, it's funny because they're both playing a very maybe slightly altered versions of the same offense. So what the Browns offense looks like, and it likes to hold on to the ball. And so it is with Kirk Cousins. It isn't that he's a mad bomber. He gets you down the field like Baker Mayfield. It's the most common comparison, and it's an irritating and grating comparison to say, and I actually saw some predictions of the game where people were saying, and maybe Baker Mayfield is taking a look at what he's going to grow up to be. And it's like, oh, please, don't even go there. I mean, I think Baker
Mayfield.
Mayfield.
You're basing it on this year's stats. If Baker Mayfield turns out to be this year's stats, I'd say that's a pretty damn good quarterback.
Yeah, and I have nothing against Kirk Cousins. He hasn't played with the best teams. That's for damn sure. Can he be better than what he has been? Yeah. He could have earned a better fate. But he's inconsistent. The history of the quarterback is that he can put some games together and then put some real bad games together. And the same thing was true of Baker Mayfield early in his career, but then he didn't know what plays were being called and why early in his career. More recently, Baker Mayfield is much more focused on what's happening in front of him. But the game he's coming off of, he's going to have to play better than when he played against the Bears to beat the Vikings, because you cannot miss wide open receivers. You cannot overthrow people. By 4 or 5 yards, you're going to throw picks. He almost threw a pick on a sideline pattern. You can't throw late to the sidelines. You can't do those kinds of things. So that's, what makes this one a real tough one to call. Tony, this is your team. How do you think the Vikings can win, and how do you think the Vikings can lose?
They can win by playing how they've played. Shut down, limit the running game, shut down a secondary receiver from going bananas, and just play your game. Because realistically, Joseph hits the kick, Dalvin Cook doesn't fumble, we're 3-0. And so that's how they do it. On the flip side, they're going to lose if they let one of those secondary receivers just go off, which they haven't done this year. Patrick Peterson has limited the top receivers, Tyler Lockett, Tyler Boyd, and who the fuck was the second week one? And DeAndre Hopkins to middle of the pack numbers. They have gotten a touchdown out of it, but 4 receptions for 50 yards. It's where we have Brashad Breeland on the other side, where DK Metcalf had 6 receptions for 107 and a touchdown. Jamar Chase had 5 receptions for 101 yards and a touchdown. And Christian Kirk had like 7 receptions for 130 some yards in week 2. And so it's the Browns need, if they can get a second receiver going, I don't know if it's Schwartz, Peoples-Jones.
Well, it's not likely to be Schwartz. I can tell you that. The Browns already have kind of a setup where it can be anyone at any time. Donovan Peoples-Jones could go out and catch 6 passes, okay? Or he can catch 1 or 2. Hooper can catch 6 passes, or he can catch 1 or 2. We didn't even have a Chief sighting. We didn't have a Njoku sighting last week. He can catch 4 passes, and he can get behind people, too, in the right circumstances. Rashard Higgins has proven he can catch 6, 7 balls in a game, given the right set of circumstances. And the Browns have a third tight end in Harrison Bryant who can get down the field as well. This whole thing about, OBJ, the greater loss is Jarvis Landry, who is such a great route runner that I think a lot of the other receivers, really benefited from the fact that Jarvis Landry can twist anyone like a pretzel in a pattern. And they had a couple of guys last year, young guys, the Browns receivers, and they, maybe not as sharp a route runner as Jarvis Landry is. And so those are the games that they kind of get held up a little bit. The Browns consistently are scoring 30 points a game and in that neighborhood. And they do that because there's a lot of potential targets. The other thing is, just when you think you have it figured out, and you say, well, it's going to be Kareem Hunt who catches that screen pass. Look, Nick Chubb can catch a pass and take it down the field too. It's not like, we have a lot of guys that can catch the football. To me, it's the offensive line's pass blocking that has been less than ideal against the Texans and less than ideal against the Bears. You cannot let your quarterback get sacked 5 times in a game by the Chicago Bears. And in a loud stadium like Minnesota, it is going to be, imperative that Baker definitively gets the ball out of his hands, makes his sharp reads, and is willing to take what's in front of him rather than standing in the pocket waiting for Odell to break free from 2 men, because Odell is going to get 2 men wherever he goes. Just face it. That's the way it's going to be. And that's what makes it, I think, by the time he steps back in the pocket and is just looking at, then he has to either check down like he did in the game to Higgins once, or he eats the ball. It's, and if they want to push if they want to take a look at the film of what the Bears did to stop the Browns running game in the beginning of the game, and if they want to leave themselves open to screen passes, I'm all for that too. Very high percentage play. And our 2 running backs are yards after catch guys, man. They're hard to tackle. So
now it is of note, we are getting Anthony Barr back this week, so that's big. He's our all-pro linebacker in the coverage, so that'll help big time. So, but
I mean, to me, the way the Browns win the football game, spreading the ball around and not looking so hard at Odell Beckham, but going back to what got us to where we got last year, which is spreading the ball around, and we need the 2-headed running game to play big. But the real thing that the team needs is to be somewhere in between where we were last week on defense and where we were in the first 2 games. I don't expect we're going to come out and look like world beaters like we did against the Bears. I think a lot of teams are going to look like world beaters against the Bears with Justin Fields back there and that offensive line in front of him. but we've got to look way better than we looked in the first 2 games of the year. And we got Greedy Williams in instead of Greg Newsome. And that is an opportunity, him getting isolated on a wide receiver who can hurt us. So it's going to be interesting to see what Joe Woods calls playing a team that is just so much offensively like the Cleveland Browns as far as the way they execute their run blocking and the way that they execute the middle of the field and mid-range passes more than deep balls. It's going to be interesting to see if the Browns can get their hands up at the line of scrimmage and if the Browns knock a few passes down, or whether they'll be able to, get into the passing lanes, get the proper linebacker drops, and get their hands on a few balls. And I don't mean interceptions, I mean deflections, just to try to stop, what I've seen Cousins do, which is, that this sideline patterns to Thielen and just getting first downs and not getting put to sleep so that Jefferson won't run right by him. And I'm afraid for Greedy Williams. I'm really afraid because he was a real cushion guy in the 1 year he did play. And quite honestly, was not impressive to me. I'm taking a wait and see on this, but that's how the Browns can lose. If you give up 30 points to the Minnesota Vikings, you're probably going to lose, because in that building, it's not going to be easy to beat a team like 34 or 37-30. That's not a good idea. The Browns need to come up with turnovers. They need to force Kirk Cousins to do what he has historically done, which is to throw interceptions. And if they can win the turnover battle, they'll win the football game.
Yep.
So, and I know it's trite, but the Browns are going to need a different kind of help from their defense. They're not going to sack Kirk Cousins 9 times. That's not going to happen. But
no, but if they could get home 3 or 4, that could be a game changer as well.
Or if Clowney gets pressures that forces him to throw the ball early, his receiver's not ready, and those end up deflections and interceptions, whatever, you want to hurry him. Hurries are going to be more important to me than the actual sack figures, because Cousins has been known to put the ball up, and he puts them up for grabs. Tony has seen this.
Yes.
This is, but they've been so structured and disciplined this year. It's safe to say that the Vikings have not played a team as good as the Browns.
Nope.
And the Browns have played a team better than the Vikings and the Chiefs, but they lost because they didn't get any turnovers and they couldn't outscore a team like that. And their defense gave up 30 plus.
Yeah, the Sharman ultra soft fucking defensive game plan really bit him in the ass.
Yeah. And, as far as what people around, the prognosticators are saying, they're saying that a higher number, there's a greater, what do they call it, the FPI prediction percentage chance is like 54% that the Vikings win the game. But a lot of people are saying the game is going to, like I'm looking at Fansided saying it's 35-31 Minnesota. I've got all of these up here on the screen, and I'm not saying that there is, that the DraftKings is basically saying they have low confidence that the Vikings will beat the Browns, but that means they're favoring the Vikings, but aren't real confident about that. That means, that more of their, 7 of their guys said that it's going to be the Vikings, and 6 of them said the Browns. But this is the stuff of which flip a coin kind of games take place. And this one shapes up to be that way. It's I could see, honestly, the Vikings blowing the Browns out. I could see it. if in that loud building things just got off to an awful bad start, I could see that.
I'm not so sure it's going to be a blowout. It's you're right. It's an absolute toss up. I don't, I want to back my team, but the smart person in me says this is like kind of a letdown, as everybody hypes up. But then again, that they, for some odd reason, when that stadium gets loud and rocking, and the game's already virtually sold out, um, it's going to be a hard place to play, especially for the Browns who don't play in domes often.
Yeah, and again, these are the games when we talk about the playoffs. I don't talk about the Super Bowl. Fans insist on talking about that. I talk about the playoffs. These are the games you have to win. You're not going to be able to play the Bears, and the Texans with second string quarterbacks all year long. You're going to have to. The Browns are going to have to suck it up and beat the Vikings, and they're going to have to go out to San Diego and play a really good football team out there. And then you'll find out how good the Cleveland Browns are. And that becomes a challenge. These are games you just have to win. AZ Central is picking the Browns 27-24. This is really kind of how it's falling. Flip a coin. I wish I could. I wish I could be more precise about this.
I don't know how you can be more. I mean, they're legitimately almost two borderline even teams.
And right now, the difference between 2-1 and 1-2 don't mean nothing.
No.
And I don't think any of us believes the Bengals are going to continue to be winning at a 3-1 pace throughout the rest of the season. It's still early, and
the injury bug will eventually catch up to them. So,
well, I'll say this about Joe Burrow, and I think that Joe Burrow is a good young quarterback, but his movement still in the pocket looks jumpy to me. That knee is not, they have him throwing less and throwing quicker. They don't have him standing in the pocket for long periods of time. And, but I think of the young quarterbacks, he is a real Sharpie. He reads the field well and he makes good throws. And boy, he has an undeniable chemistry with his rookie receiver, with Jamar Chase. My goodness. They laid that ball right in his arms, and Jamar Chase is going to be a force for years to come in our division. But there's, the thing I wanted to say about Cincinnati, and I forgot to mention this. You want to talk about, somebody who has no testicles. Zach Taylor is going to be what's going to cost them eventually. When you stop a team and you just want to go into the locker room down 14-0, and what you do is you start intentionally taking delay of game penalties so that they'll move the ball back from the half-yard line to the quarter-yard line. You got no faith whatsoever that your offensive line on a straight handoff will just give up 2-3 yards, and then you can just take a fucking knee or do whatever. You got no confidence. Zach Jackson has proven in the past that his decision-making is not the best.
It reminds me of that 2007 season with the Browns where Derek Anderson and they went, 10-7 or 10-6, and Romeo Crennel, everybody thought like he was saving his job. Zach Taylor's not a good coach, and my fear is this is going to lead Cincinnati to think that, maybe he is a decent coach, we'll keep him on. And he'll ruin Burrow. He'll ruin the rest of the young stars they have on that team. And it'll be another 5 years of just misery loves company for our
they don't have depth. The Bengals don't have depth. And the other thing is when you're looking at the Steelers in our division, and, and I always say that we'll talk about those games as well. the Steelers have a real problem on their hands because their offensive line looks like horse shit, absolute horse shit.
Yeah.
And, you know, you have a quarterback who really is badly hurt. And he has been beaten up. And last year, by the end of the year, you saw how bad, and he has not recovered. He is looking bad. And, you know, it's not to say that they can't come back and win a few games, but in the long haul, the season's too long, way too long for him, and he's going to get hurt. And, you know, I'm not at all high on the Steelers at all. I just
Well, and I didn't think that they would have, with Ben coming back, I knew that they weren't going to be better than a sub 500 team. I fully expect them to go 8-9 or 7-10.
Yeah, there may be a hurrah here and there, but you know, they gotta play the Green Bay Packers. You know,
Yep.
I mean, and Aaron Rodgers is looking a lot more like a football player than a host of Jeopardy, and the Steelers' defense is not what it used to be. So again, this is another home game for the Steelers, and they're losing home games. It only gets tougher, folks. When you go on the road with that, it only gets tougher. So, you know, then there's the Ravens. And, you know, the Ravens are playing an undefeated team, but we all don't know really what the Broncos are. And I have not watched any Denver. I haven't watched a minute of film on the Denver Broncos. Anybody on our panel have an opinion of this?
I think that would be a closer game than the Browns-Vikings game will be. One thing that wasn't mentioned by any of the panelists so far is that Stefanski happens to know a lot about the Vikings roster and happens to know a lot about Minnesota in general and playing in that stadium. So what I suggest is that he's going to game plan for these guys. And what concerns me is what Moo pointed out earlier is that the fact that Greedy Williams has to start in place of Greg Newsome. Because I think Greg Newsome is the boss. And we don't know how good Greedy Williams is, and we don't know whether he can play tight coverage. And he's going to have to go against Thielen or Jefferson at some point, and they're going to get their 4 or 5 catches. But the Vikings defense is not as good as the Bears defense, and the Vikings offense is not as good as the Browns offense. So
Or the Chiefs.
So I'm going to say, in a very bullish way, that the Browns are going to outscore the Vikings by double. So whatever the Vikings score, the Browns are going to get double, and I'll go for 38-19.
All right, and Tony, you've picked it as. Go ahead, give us your score again.
I said 31-27 Vikings.
All right, and Brian.
I got the Browns 33-29.
And I'm going to go with the Browns 34-31 in overtime. And
as well, absolutely.
And I mean, that's my way of saying really I love the Browns, but flip a coin.
I think we match up really well. This is a lot like the Titans game last year, where we just literally pounded the Titans, and then we let them come back in the game in the second half and get like about 3 garbage time TDs. They had Derrick Henry, and they had fucking Tannehill, and they had wide receivers. I think it's a repeat of that game. If we get the ball straight away, march down the field, and Kirk Cousins has to play catch-up against our defense, we're finally going to get some turnovers on the defense, which we have not gotten all year. Strip sacks, interceptions, it's all waiting to happen for Kirk Cousins because he's been pretty fortunate so far this year.
Yeah. And I stand corrected. The game is in Green Bay. That makes it harder for the Steelers. My goodness.
Well, at least it'll be warmer there.
Yeah, but as far as the Ravens are concerned, I think the Ravens are going to beat the Broncos. I think the Broncos are not likely to be a
Well,
undefeated team for long.
they could be one of these teams that you just can't get a read on. I mean, this season's been hard to get a read on. And at some point, I think by week 5, by next week, there may not be any undefeated teams. Because one of them's got to go in the Rams and whoever the other undefeated team they're playing. And there could be no undefeated teams by week 5.
But the thing to keep an eye on, and I don't know much about Denver at all, is Lamar Jackson and his health. Because it could all change in a heartbeat for that team. And I have already predicted that it's going to happen this year.
If he gets
that he
hurt,
is going to miss
they're
time.
bad, man.
That he is going to miss not just practice time, but football games this year. And we know that when you lose a quarterback, especially when you're really in it to win it as far as getting into the playoffs, those weeks can be, it was like those weeks where Roethlisberger, when he was younger, got hurt, and he would have Tommy Maddox play, or they would have who was the other backup that would play?
Bobby Brister.
No,
and Malone,
no.
Carl Malone or whatever.
Not that fucking old.
Not that far. No, but the guy, they won on several occasions with backup quarterbacks.
Are you talking Charlie?
Byron Leftwich was the backup the one year.
And what were you saying, Tony?
Charlie Batch.
Charlie Batch.
Charlie Batch. Boy, there's one you don't remember. He was a Lions quarterback, wasn't he?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, my goodness. But the whole thing with Baltimore, everything is being given to Lamar Jackson. He's been handed the reins offensively, and if something happens to him, they're lost because Harbaugh is not going to be able to help them.
Well, one thing you can never accuse Lamar Jackson of is being cerebral. So I think he's got that going against him too.
They don't have any quarterback depth either. I think their backup is fucking Trace McSorley from Indiana.
Oh, he is.
No, Penn State.
Penn State.
Penn State. That's right. Fuck.
Yeah.
Penn State, dude.
But Rick points out the obvious. Thank you. The Jets, the Giants, and the Jags couldn't beat up your kid sister. So there you have it. The Broncos are facing by far the best team that that they've seen this year. So
then I've watched a little bit of them. They're typical Teddy Bridgewater dink and dunk offense.
Well, I mean, Teddy Bridgewater is what he is. You know that, Tony, and and Saints fans know that too. He is what he is, and that's what Tyrod Taylor is. Teddy's younger, same kind of guy, not going to beat you downfield big with his arm. And if you're going to try to dink and dunk against the Ravens, I don't know. I don't know how that's going to go over, but I suppose anything is humanly possible. But, picking a team in overtime for me, I love the Browns. I want the Browns to win. That's what this pick is all about. It could go either way. Yeah, Bronk.
Oh, fun fact about the Minnesota Stadium is that their super duper glass roof is well known for killing migratory birds who slam into the roof. So if the Vikings fans get behind by 3 touchdowns, they can just watch the roof and watch some fucking ducks slam straight into the glass and kill themselves. And
I'm gonna finish up with a story here that should be so familiar to Browns fans. What do you do when you're sitting at a poker table and every hand that you're delt's a bad hand? You cannot bluff your way to victory when you never hold cards in your hand.
Correct.
Because eventually people at the table go, fuck this guy, he got no cards, and you're just screwed. Teams that have bad players, you can't bluff with it. And I can't make up a story this stupid. Chicago Bears coach Matt Nagy to make game time decision on whether it's Andy Dalton or Justin Fields, and I'm sure their opponent is just wetting their pants in anticipation of saying, oh God, I hope it's not one or the other. I mean, like this secret is going to somehow. I mean, look, if Andy Dalton can walk, Andy Dalton's going to fucking play. They can't send that kid back out on the field again.
No.
Based on what we saw, they can't do that. And the Lions are a winnable game for them.
Yeah, I don't think the Lions are already wetting their pants. I don't think they're wetting them more.
Yeah, but I mean, to me, it's just so funny that to think that I'm going to do the old game time decision to keep the opponent really off balance. And,
Didn't Hugh Jackson do that shit?
that's the kind of stupidity we've seen in Cleveland from all kinds of dumb, the kumquat Shermer, all of them. They think they're being clever.
Baker.
Say what?
Will it be Tyrod? Will it be Baker? Tune in Sunday. It's just
just foolishness, absolute foolishness. I also wanted to point out something. I'm not a big college football fan. What I have a problem with is the coaching merry-go-round and how coaches, when they are young, they're offensive coordinators. A number of weeks ago, we were talking about Gus Malzahn when he, the whole Marcus Dupree story and all of that insanity all the way back when. And Malzahn has always been an opportunist to jump back into however many jobs, head coaching jobs he can get. He gets fired, and then he goes to a program and he does pretty well. And then he always tries to leap back up into a larger major program. And this revolving door goes on. And it's a refreshing story coming out of Arkansas. I don't know how long it's been since Arkansas has even been talked about as far as college football is concerned. This is a team that is 4-0 this year, and they're going into an SEC showdown, ranked number 8, but they're going up against number 2 Georgia, and boy, that's when the going gets rough.
They're going to get killed.
But the thing that's great about this is that their coach, Sam Pittman, is a guy who's been around for decades as a college assistant and never had a head coaching job. He wasn't even the guy that Arkansas really wanted to hire. But that's, when you're Arkansas and you've, the last 3 years, Arkansas has barely won football games. And being in the SEC, you're just cannon fodder. And this guy gets the job, and he's 4-0. It's a real feel-good story. I don't know. Is it going to last in the SEC? Not for long. But I believe that, a guy who grew up the son of a coach and a guy who put 25 years into being a college assistant and waited his turn for an opportunity, and he has turned this program around. It's just amazing. To me, you don't hear about this kind of stuff, unfortunately, and I wish you did, because that's what makes sports. And I want to tell everybody, of course, we're going to be here on Sunday. We're going to be there at halftime. We're going to be there in the post game, and I'm wishing the Browns well. I want to see us go out there, and we're a professional group of guys, give a professional effort. I want to see the offensive mistakes that we made, both in the offensive line and the execution on snap counts. I want that erased. Yeah, Bronk.
Last week, we had 4 field goals, and we turned the ball over on 4th down twice. If half of those were converted into touchdowns, that's an additional 12 points, and that would have been us close to fucking 40 points. Yeah. If we do that this week, then that's how we win.
John Brown is a guy who watched the program many years ago from Youngstown, and he's out in the world now doing his thing. And
he led a slave revolt.
Was it Youngstown or was it Warren, Ohio? I thought it was.
Well, yeah, I consider them one and the same, but he was all part of that EIEIOFL madness in the 2000s that we had. And I love it when people just drop in and say hi. And John, I hope everything is going well for you. I hope everything is going well with your health and your family. And, you know, yeah, that's what he said, one of the same. But yeah, Warren, you're right, Tony. But it's just great to hear from people who were part of the program so long ago. I mean, it's been 17 years since I've been doing this, and the people who were young when I was starting out, I was never young, all right? But I was Methuselah of podcasting back in 2004, 2005.
You were 43. That's still relative.
No, at the time, I was actually 47. And guys like John were the young guys, the young breed, and wanting to, he was pursuing a career in being athletic directors at universities. And a guy who we had on the show and was a real Youngstown Warren booster. And we did a lot at the time with the Vindicator, the newspaper in Youngstown out there. And it was a lot of fun. So, that's right. He started calling MC when he was in high school. So a lot of I feel like you guys have grown up, and it's kind of cool. I just want to thank you for stopping by. And anytime, if you ever want to click on the link and jump in and say hi, I know your professional standards may not allow that. I understand, but thank you for coming in and saying hi. And I'm glad everything is going well for you. And I hope everything in everyone else's world is going well as well. And thanks for tuning into this edition of Moohead Radio. Back again on Sunday at halftime, usually around 2:30, about the halftime show. 12 minutes, fast minutes of first half analysis, and then the post-game show afterwards. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you then. And go Browns. Hasta la vista, Pastor Heads. Good night.
See you Sunday. Thanks for